In this video, I'm going to be talking about Chart 19.4. Chart 19.4, as the name says it's called Summary of Patterns and Punctuation. It's a summary of some material that's already been taught in Chapter 19. But one piece is new, and I want to teach you that. But before I teach you that, let's go over the review part. Let's go over the summary. So, the first is, the words because and because of can come in the middle or the beginning of a sentence. If they come at the beginning, I use a comma. So I could say, John studied all night because he had a test. Notice that when because comes in the middle, no comma. No comma. But if it comes at the beginning, I'll say, because he had a test, comma, John studied all night. So, when because comes in the beginning of a sentence, I use a comma. The same is true with because of. I can say, John studied all night because of a test. Or I can say, because of a test, comma, John studied all night. When because of comes in the middle of the sentence, I do not use a comma. When it comes at the beginning, then I use a comma. So with because and because of, they can come at the beginning or they can come in the middle of the sentence. If they come in the beginning, use a comma. If they come in the middle, no comma. Then, this chart, we also learned about so in this chapter. So comes in the middle, and it joins the two sentences into one sentence. So I could say, John had a test, comma, so he studied all night. So uses a comma. Now, I want to talk about, actually, this is new. It's not in your book, but let me talk about that a little bit. Depending on your teacher, you may get different information about this. Someone who is a more formal, a more formal teacher may tell you, so does not come at the beginning of a sentence. So always comes in the middle of a sentence, and it always uses a comma to join when it joins two sentences. But you may see, in fact you will see, because Americans do this all of the time, you will see people often putting so at the beginning of a sentence, like this. I might say, John had a test, period, so he studied all night. So, your book doesn't teach you about this option, but you will see it all of the time. In fact, you'll even see it in newspapers, magazines, books. So, this is informal. This is formal. And I would say using it in the middle to join two sentences is safer. If you're writing a college for paper, if you're writing a paper for college and you have to decide, do I want to try to start a sentence with so, like this? Or do I put it between? My suggestion is, do the more formal way. John had a test, comma, so he studied all night. The reason is, the formal way is safe. Nobody thinks it's wrong. The informal way, some teachers might say, okay, fine. But other teachers might say, no, that's wrong. So, until you know a little bit more about your teacher, I would recommend going with the formal way. Okay, now there's one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and that is with therefore and consequently. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. John had a test. John had a test. Period. Therefore, he studied all night. Okay. So, what we've already learned about therefore, and also the word consequently, is that these mean the same as so. They mean the same as so, but they work differently. So can join two sentences and make the two sentences into one sentence. Therefore and consequently do not join sentences. So instead of putting a comma here, I put a period. You also learned that I'll use a comma with therefore and consequently. Again, I mentioned sometimes you'll see it without, but it's safer to use a comma. So my suggestion, use a comma. And we also learned, though I won't write it on the board right now, but we also learned therefore can come in different places at the sentence. It can come at the beginning, or it can come after the subject, or it can come after the verb, or it can come at the end. So I could say, John had a test, therefore, comma, he studied all night. I can also say, John had a test. He, comma, therefore, comma, studied all night. Or I could say, John had then it can come after the verb. I could say, John had a test. He studied, comma, therefore, comma, all night. Or it can come at the end. And I could say, John had a test. He studied all night, comma, therefore. All of those are correct, but you might remember that I said it's uncommon for therefore to come at the end. You'll see it sometimes, but it's rare. We also mentioned that consequently can do the same thing. Consequently can come in different places in the sentence, but it usually comes at the beginning. And that's probably the safer place to put it. There are times when it might sound funny if it was put somewhere else. Even though it might sound funny, but it would still be grammatically correct, just so you know. Okay, the new thing that I want to teach you is you will remember that I said, therefore and consequently do not join sentences. So let me write that here. Therefore and consequently do not join sentences. Okay? So, then you might wonder, oh, therefore and consequently don't join sentences. Is there anything I can do if I want to join these two sentences together? I know that therefore and consequently, they can't do it. But if I want to put those two sentences together, is there a way? Answer, yes. One of these things. A comma with a dot over it. The name of this is a semicolon. And a semicolon can join two sentences together with no joining word. So let me write that on the board, and then I will give you an example. A semicolon, and I hope you can see the spelling there, semicolon. So I could say, I'm going to give you an example of how it can join two sentences together. And then I'll come back and I'll connect it to this. Okay? So please be a little patient. If you're wondering where this is going and how it connects, it'll become clear in a second. So I might say, John wanted, I need to make some more room there. John wanted to go home. He was tired of the party. So, here, please notice, I have, well, take a look at this sentence. John wanted to go home. He was tired of the party. Let's look at this sentence. Two parts. John wanted to go home. Question number one, is that a sentence? Take a minute and think. John wanted to go home. Is that a sentence? You can pause if you want to think about it. Answer, yes, it can be a sentence by itself. If I just say John wanted to go home, that can be a sentence. So if I just say John wanted to go home, that can be a complete sentence by itself. So we could say this is one sentence. And then if I say he was tired of the party, can that be a sentence by itself? Take a minute and think. He was tired of the party. Can that be a sentence by itself? The answer is yes, it can. So here I have 1, 2 sentences. Usually, when I join two sentences together into one sentence in English, usually when I join two sentences into one, I need a joining word, like and, or but, or so, or because. So usually when I join two sentences, I use a joining word. But this semicolon can join the two sentences into one with no joining word. So I can say, John wanted to go home, semicolon. No capital H. No capital H because it's not a new sentence. It's still one sentence. He was tired of the party. So, a semicolon is something you can use if you want to join two sentences together, but you don't want to use a joining word. Maybe you have used and a lot, and you don't want to use it again. Or maybe you used because a lot, and you don't want to use it again. This is a choice that you have. The semicolon shows, using a semicolon shows that, well, let me tell you, we use a semicolon when we want to say, in my mind, as a writer, in my mind, these two sentences are closely connected. They're very closely related, so I want to put a semicolon here to make them into one sentence. This semicolon shows, I think this idea is closely related to this. So when you use a semicolon, when you write, it shows the reader, I think these two are closely connected. Okay. Okay, so that's the first new thing that we've learned here, is when I use it, a semicolon can be used to join two sentences without a joining word. Okay, now, what does it have to do with this? Let me erase these two sentences. Do you remember that I said, therefore and consequently do not join sentences? Therefore, when I use therefore and consequently, I use a period rather than a comma. But if I want to, I can join these two sentences with a semicolon, because a semicolon joins two sentences together, even though there's not a word that joins the two sentences. Let me show you how we could do this here. I could say, John had a test. There's my sentence number 1, and then I have semicolon. John had a test, semicolon. Then I can say, therefore, comma, notice no capital, because with the semicolon, it joins them into one sentence. So this is not a new sentence, same sentence, no capital, because the semicolon joins the sentences together into one sentence. So no new sentence, and I could say, therefore, he studied all night. So sometimes you will see therefore and also consequently. Let me put this here. Oh, let me use a different color so it doesn't get confused with all night. I could say John had a test, semicolon, small t, therefore, comma, he studied all night. Or I could say, John had a test, semicolon, consequently, comma, he studied all night. So, therefore and consequently cannot join two sentences together. But a semicolon can join two sentences together with no joining word. So, even though therefore and consequently don't join two sentences together, if you want to, you can join those two sentences together with a semicolon. And that is the one piece of new information that chart 19.4 gives you.